Hello, my name's Keith Haswell. I'm a professional astrologer with 25,000 clients worldwide, and I've been teaching metaphysics and astrology and meditation, reincarnation and so forth for a good 35 years. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this particular video on the topic of reincarnation. When I start talking on one of these videos, I hope to cram everything into 15 minutes, which is the limit for the upload with YouTube, but quite often it goes into two videos, so be sure that you play the previous videos. I've numbered all of them so that you can watch them all in their ordered sequence. Now, this one is not on the fundamentals and the basics of how reincarnation works and how it functions. I'll cover that in more depth in another video that I'll do after this one. This one is just looking at the proof of reincarnation, and I regard this as 100% proof, what I'm going to reveal to you here. 100% proof of the existence of reincarnation. Reincarnation is not a new teaching. It's something that's been taught for thousands of years. Buddha, 4,000 years ago, taught about reincarnation and started the Buddhist faith. And the Bhagavad Gita is the writings of Krishna and the teachings of Krishna and Sri Krishna, and he taught about reincarnation, and that's the basis of the Hindu faith now. And the early teachings of Christ included many references to reincarnation. He made the famous statement that in order to get into heaven you must be born again. But in the year 400, the World Council of Churches had a meeting, and they decided that they would cut out all references to reincarnation and previous lives from the Bible because they felt that it gave them greater control over a person if they thought that they only had one life and they had to prove in that life they had to work their way into heaven in that particular lifetime, or else they would end up in eternal hell fire and damnation and punishment and pain for eternity in hell. And so that gave them much more control over the mind of man, and also over their money. Anyway, so that's the story about Christianity and how it's blocked out all of the teachings of reincarnation. But there's many references in the Bible where Christ says that in order to get into the kingdom of heaven, you must be born again. Once you get your horoscope done by a competent professional astrologer, and once you study astrology, and once you get into the science of meditation and start delving into things very deeply, then you develop the intuition. And the intuition is a faculty that tells you that you just know something to be truth, yet you don't need the mental components to validate that truth. And that's where I'll be leading you if you get into my intensives and watch all my videos, and you'll be led into the development of your higher mind and your intuition. Look, the reincarnation is so obvious when you look at the nature of reality and the creation there. And you look at all of the beautiful flowers and the plants, and to think that every human being has got individual fingerprints. Why? Why did it have to be that way? Why is every snowflake different under an electron microscope? Every single snowflake is unique. It's absolutely staggering. So there's just so much evidence there of design in the universe, not to mention the the body and the intricacy and complexity of the body and the DNA and all of that. I mean, when you put all of the pieces of the puzzle together, there's ever so much evidence there of design in the universe, and therefore a designer. Now, that designer is infinite love and unconditional love. And so, therefore, does it make sense that that God of love and Goddess of love would only give us one life? And that would be the end of it all. Have a good time for 20 years, or if you live longer, 70 years or 80 years or 90 years. Have a good time there, because this is your only look at life. It's not logic, is it? Anyway, the first thing that we want when we're just delving into these things is we want some proof that appeals to our reasoning mind and our conscious mind. And so the first thing that we look for is evidence that the consciousness of humanity can exist outside of the body. And one of the most powerful evidences of this that I found in my studies over the 38 years was a woman who had an operation, and when she was under anaesthetic on the operating table, she was able to rise above out of her body, and she was able to relay later what the surgeons had said about the fact that they didn't think that she was going to survive, and that if she did, that she would be in a vegetative state because there was so much damage there and so forth. And she was screaming at them in this out-of-body experience and saying, "Hey, I'm here!" And she could hear them, but they couldn't hear her. And she remembers viewing the operating theatre from outside the window of the operating theatre. And she was hovering in the air outside the operating theatre, and the operating theatre happened to be 50 feet off the ground. And as she's out there looking into the operating theatre, she looks into the ledge underneath the window, and deep inside the ledge there were two sandshoes with their laces untied, and there was holes in the toes of the sandshoes, obviously old worn out sandshoes. And they'd been there for donkey's ages, and no one had been able to see them. Anyway, after the operation and after she'd recovered, she spoke to the nurse and said to her, told her about being outside the body and witnessing the operation and everything, but also about the sandshoes. And the nurse decided that she would go and check. And so she checked with the use of a mirror or something to see if those sandshoes were indeed there, and sure enough, yeah, they were there. It was staggering, relayed in one of the books that I read. But the most powerful evidence as far as reincarnation is concerned is contained within a book written by Peter Ramster, R-A-M-S-T-E-R. And in my second book, Coming Home, An Eternal Journey, I give plenty of extracts out of that book, and with his permission. And he's a hypnotherapist, an Australian hypnotherapist, and he decided to do some research into reincarnation, to take a number of people back into their past lives through the use of hypnosis. And one of these women was Gwen, and she recalled, she had no belief whatsoever, Gwen, about reincarnation, but yet she had mentioned something about a past life whilst under hypnosis on an unrelated matter. She was having hypnosis for an unrelated matter, and that was what prompted him to do his research on reincarnation and to bring in a number of good subjects to see if they could recall past lives. Anyway, this particular one, Gwen, she was able to recall under hypnosis a past life 200 years earlier in Somerset in... So this particular Australian woman, who had never been outside of Australia, never even had a passport, she was able to recall under hypnosis a past life 200 years ago in countryside England. And anyway, Peter documented and recorded everything that she said, and she gave a tremendous amount of information about the number of houses in the area where she lived, and the fact that she used to sneak out of a night time and watch these religious groups gathering and dancing and so forth. And one day she was out experimenting in this old dilapidated chapel, and she cut her foot, and one of the neighbours, Mr. Brown, had put her into his cart and taken her home and bandaged her foot for her. And in the cart there were a number of stones that he had taken from the ruins of the chapel. And she noticed when she was in the cart, she looked at this particular stone, and there was a markings on the stone that she was able, under hypnosis, to do a drawing of this marking on the stone for Peter. And anyway, that was just one of the evidences. But there were a whole heap of things that she was able to remember about the countryside. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, once Peter had gathered all of this evidence from these various women, he went overseas with a camera crew, and they went to France, and they went to Germany, and they went to this one in England, and Gwen went along for the ride. She was very excited to find out whether or not it was valid and true as well. So anyway, they went and looked in the local library, and they were able to find old records and old maps and things like that. And the modern maps, they couldn't find the exact towns and so forth that Gwen had mentioned about 200 years ago, what was in the countryside there in England. And so anyway, when they looked at old maps though, they found that yes, the towns were there. And they looked at old planning maps and so forth, and they found that yes, there were old chapels and hotels, and the hotel name had been changed and so forth in that 200 years, but it was still a hotel there, and a variety of different things that she had recalled in hypnosis. And they did the research first of all to ascertain exactly where in the countryside of England was this likely to have been. So anyway, they were able to find a number of the towns that were still the same name, and they were, through maps and so forth, able to say, yes, well, this looks like the area. And so they all went there, the camera crew and Peter and Gwen, and they started to track down all these various things. They found the stream, they found the chapel, and they even found the home where Gwen used to live. And the home had been largely unchanged, except the thatch roof had been changed into a tile roof, and there was a loft called a tallet 200 years ago, and that word is not in the English dictionary anymore. But when they looked at the old dictionary, they found that yes, that was the description of a loft in the buildings of that time. Absolutely staggering stuff. Anyway, they were able to locate a whole heap of things and little pyramids and things that she had remembered that were artifacts of the ancient times in that area, and so on and so forth. Now, what they were looking for now was the Holy Grail. And I'll read to you some of the things that lead up to this from Peter's book. When we commenced with this research, Gwen had come to see me through events that were not of her own design. At that time, she did not know of any past life, nor did she believe in one. When told that under hypnosis she was recalling a past life, she was surprised. By visiting Somerset, Gwen knew that she had lived before and was home in the place of her former life. Most everyone in our group wanted to believe, but there were doubts. These doubts still niggled the back of the mind and detracted from the certainty. Yet each day our doubts were dispersing and our beliefs were being strengthened. We wrestled with our minds and our beliefs, finding it difficult to comprehend the enormity of what was happening and the ramifications of what we were proving. Slowly, one felt the need to accept wholeheartedly it was something supernormal, something supreme, something about the universe and our destinies which only made us feel all the smaller. Most of us were both moved and somehow changed by the experience, and we began to feel aware of a growing confidence in what we were doing. 200 years now, they were looking for this building, this home of Mr. Brown's, the one who had put Gwen into the cart and bandaged her foot. And if they could find that stone that was in the back of her cart that he was going to use to put on the floor of his home, if they could find that stone that she had drawn the diagram of the etching on that stone, then that would be a marvellous evidence. From page 109 of his book, 200 years is a long time. It was unlikely they could have remained intact. We were there to find out. This was the end of the search. After all that Gwen had achieved, if it could be verified, it would be the crowning glory. We were all very tired. Okay, I'll read from my book now so that you get the idea of its full impact of what this stone was all about. A lot had changed in that particular area, and they were concerned as Gwen tried to unravel the maze of new roads and buildings. If Gwen could find the cottages, we would consider it a tremendous feat. When they looked closely, they found that it was only a chicken shed. They peered in and saw that the floor of the shed was covered with chicken droppings. They found the owner, who lived nearby, and asked him about the history of the place. He sent them to the man who had owned it previously. He confirmed that there had indeed been 5 houses at that site, and that the houses were as Gwen had described, and one of those houses was Mr. Brown's. Time had taken its toll on the 5 houses, and eventually they were unsafe for living in. They were turned into one long chicken shed. Eventually, the end cottages were pulled down altogether, and only part of the original buildings now remained. Fortunately, Mr. Brown's cottage was one of the middle ones, so it constituted part of the shed that was now left standing after 200 years. They were now looking for the Holy Grail of evidence. If they could find those stones under the chicken droppings, especially the one that Gwen had drawn in Sydney, it would be irrefutable proof of the truth of reincarnation. They asked the owner if they could come back the next morning, clear the chicken droppings from the floor, and loosen what they expected would be the stones on the floor. The owner agreed and even said that he would help. They came back the next day to finalise the journey that had rocked every member to their roots. They duly removed the chicken droppings, found the stones on the floor, and even found the Holy Grail, the Stone of Stones. The one that Gwen had seen 200 years ago as a young girl in the back of a neighbour's cart. As Rose Duncan, she had cut her foot, and Destiny had seen her notice the markings on a stone. She was marked for greatness in a life 200 years later in Australia. She would play an important role in the destiny of humanity. Peter takes up the story on page 111. He said, "We had already explained to the property owners what we were there for. They seemed bewildered by our activities and probably thought we were all a bit mad. After all, it's not every day that a group of people from the other side of the world want to look at the floor of your chicken shed." However, they humoured us and we told them about the markings on the stone we were now looking for. Gwen, the owner and family, the entire film crew and I entered the overcrowded shed for the final scrutiny. Gwen surveyed them all and then pointed to one. We levered the stone out. After a further wash, we could see the markings more clearly. Comparing the stone to Gwen's drawing, the similarity was obvious. The markings that Gwen had drawn on the left-hand side of the stone were like the map lines of the tip of Scotland, and the large spiral was on the right-hand side of the stone. It was a remarkable find. As well as the hill, the stream, the cottages, and the abbey stones, Gwen had found the very stone that she had drawn in Sydney, a feat far beyond any element of chance. We were lucky that after all this time, it was still there. For me, and of course Gwen, all doubts about reincarnation had been dispelled. Instead, due to the indisputable evidence put before us, there was belief. I felt privileged to have been a part of the search that we had undertaken. And Peter even gave me the permission to be able to print the photos of that drawing that Gwen had drawn in Sydney, and the photos of the stone and the markings on the stone, and they've been enhanced by graphics to point out how they are so similar to the drawing that she did in Sydney. And there, the top one is the drawing in Sydney, the middle one is the unwashed stone or the washed stone, and the bottom one is the graphics enhanced. It's absolutely staggering proof. Of the fact that you have lived before. Yes, we've all lived hundreds of lifetimes, and as you progress on the path of expanding your understanding and expanding your consciousness, all of this proof doesn't even become necessary, but it is necessary in the early stages of your unfoldment to have this sort of proof, because that then inspires you to want to look further into things. And you get absolute proof of the existence of these inner worlds once you start delving into meditation and practicing meditation. And when you start learning about processing and programming, which I'm going to do videos on all of these different topics for you, meditation and processing and programming, and how reincarnation works and how many lives that you live and what happens after death, and all of this I'm going to do in more videos for you to help you to understand all these things and to become more of who you really are. And once you get into the deeper side of it all later with a look at the larger plan, which I'll also cover, and I cover in much more depth in my intensives, then you're going to turn around and say, how did I ever miss out on this? Because what does belief in reincarnation do for you? It means, first of all, that you have no fear of death. And it means that you have lived dozens and dozens and dozens of lives, and you start to perceive life from a spiritual angle, from a spiritual point of view. And more importantly, you start to look upon all other people as being souls, trapped in bodies, in incarnation, all working to become more of who they really are. When you get into all of these things, it makes you think, why is there any other conversation among humanity other than spiritual growth? It's the only game in town. We're all growing spiritually whether we like it or not. Even when we make mistakes, we grow and we learn from that through introspection and reflection. Look, it's wonderful to think that God and Goddess have given us eternal life, that we can never ever die, and that we've lived dozens and dozens and dozens of lives, hundreds of lives, some of them only 2 or 3 years long, to get where we are today in our consciousness. The name of the game is consciousness expansion. Consciousness is the primary factor. There's 3 energies in the universe: spiritual energy, soul energy, and the energy of matter. Superhuman beings exhibit spiritual energy. Humanity exhibits soul energy, and the subhuman kingdoms exhibit the energy of matter. They don't have mind. And the nature of consciousness, the nature of the soul, is consciousness. It's the soul that confers consciousness upon us. That's what gives us our consciousness. It's very, very exciting when you start delving into all of these things. And you will have no more fear of death. You will start to look after your body because you will realize that it is the temple of your soul. You'll start exercising, you'll start eating good food, and you'll start to learn about meditation and reincarnation and how it all works, and more importantly, how you can process all of these negative aspects of yourself, all of this complexity within yourself, and clean it all out and purify your emotional body and your mental body so that you can learn meditation and focus upon meditation. And then you can learn how to program, how to create your reality in accordance and compliance with your will instead of your subconscious will as it is now, and instead of through your blockages as it is now. So I invite you to have your horoscope done by me and to look at all of my previous videos if you haven't seen them, and to look for my future videos, to subscribe to my videos so that you can get them all as they come out, and I'll help you to become more of who you really are, and I'll do your horoscope for you free of charge so that you can learn more about the giant that you are, and more about your goodness, truth and beauty, and start unfolding your power, strength and talent. And God and Goddess love you, and they know your name. So thank you for your attentiveness here, and I look forward to working more with you in the future, in future videos, and we'll go on into the functioning and the ways that reincarnation works in another video to come. Thank you.